All right, we're going live shortly. Bear with me. What is up, people? What is up, people? What is up, people? It is your boy MM2K of GEiX, Cloud Dosage, Hard Knock Digital Culture, back again with a new game stream. I mean, not a new game stream. Jesus Christ, what am I talking about? With a new member stream. This is member plus content. I got Helldivers on the brain because I can't wait to get a hold of it. Because this is going to be a hell of a game stream. I love this game so much. I've been feeding for it all week and I haven't been able to play it since Friday because of life stuff. But I'm going to jump into it today. Thank you for coming. I don't want to spend too much time doing this because I do want to hop to that. But I did notice something over the weekend that caught my eye, that kind of perplexed me, that I felt like that I should share with and talk to you all about it. What is that? Well, the Xbox rumorville, and again, to be 100% clear on this, because I think a lot of times when you guys hear content, you might hear sharp, heavy hitting, jagged opinion, and you're not paying attention. You're not listening. I hate to be mean or sound facetious or anything like that, but there's too much of that going on. And I'm talking to people who are guilty of this, who in your normal lives have critical thinking skills, can separate the forest from the trees, can parse rhetoric from criticism, from factual reporting and stuff like that. For some reason in this space, y'all cannot do it here. All y'all do is knee-jerk react. So let me do it slow. Let me do it precise. Let me try to be concise. Number one, we are not saying that all, if any, of the rumors are true. They are rumors until they are validated. However, it is in our belief system. It is our subjective belief system that because of the things that we're seeing on the periphery, because of how Xbox is responding to this, that those things alone are indicative of there being some heartburn messaging for a large swath of its demographic. But the icing on the cake is the information that I'm hearing from trusted sources. Anything's possible. Any of this can be false. All of it can be false. But as far as Xbox now doing the unprecedented move in being more active in making pillar content third party, you know, it's a case by case basis on that. Them completely bowing out of the exclusive battle towards our ecosystem from PlayStation. Those rumors are just rumors at that point in time, but we understand why they create, again, such heartburn for a certain onset of consumers, and we understand the discussions behind them. Okay, so that's one. We want to be very clear that we understand the discussions, but we understand, more importantly, these are rumors. And anybody that's approaching it like, you know what, I'm not getting into anything until I hear something or see something definitive from them, that's fine. We just feel like there's enough writings on the wall for us to conclude XYZ and to have discussions based on certain conclusions. They're just not etched in stone. All right. That said, also, if you are a particular type of gamer that is not into genre-defining AAA console gaming, you weren't part of the original Xbox lineage like myself and others who thrived off the fact that there were stellar games like Jade Empire, Knights of the Old Republic, Armed and Dangerous, 99 Nights, you know, even those that at first got glanced over, but then were looked at later, Knights of the Old Republic, Too Human, Mass Effect, BioShock, games like that where without Microsoft support, they would have never came to fruition. Those are games that changed the trajectory of gaming forever. if you like and adore those type of games and that type of innovation being brought to gaming, then you know how those games came about. Those games came about because there was one company's desire to pull you into their ecosystem over another company's. Meaning, we know that you got to make a choice. We know that every gamer doesn't have all of the platforms. But if there is a platform that you're definitively going to get, whether you have a choice to make or not, we want it to be ours. We want ours to be at the top of your list. So in order for ours to be on top of the list, we know the thing that's going to drive things over are the AAA genre defining games. Why? Because they bring in the hardcore gamers those first 3 to 4 years after a game platform has launched. And then after those 3 or 4 years, when the casuals start coming over, they take a look and observe where gamers have been flocking to, and then they follow. It is because of that desire, that need that's put around ensuring that you buy my expensive box that said games are created. And a lot of us feel that if you pull that dynamic away, then the incentive to make such games start to go away. If you don't feel that way, if AA indie type games or the quality that Microsoft is putting out right now, or just the advent of Game Pass is all that you need, then this discussion isn't catered towards you, but you're more than welcome to remain if you're being entertained, right? This is catered towards those that have concerns and queries in the AAA genre defining space. And I can hear some of you right now saying, well, why do those games, only those games matter? Who cares? I don't even want to get into that discussion. That is so ungamer-like. There are gamers that like all types of stuff, all types of demographics, before a lot of you that are new to the scene even started getting into gaming. You got to do your research. We are not flipping gaming upside down on its head to help you cope with the type of demographics that are out there. I am not saying one demographic is more important than another. It's just that some people have preferences. Those preferences lay on certain types of games, and to ensure that gamers of all ilk are satisfied and what they meet or what they expect, the expectations they have are met, I am not against any type of demographic having a safe haven to talk about the stuff that they like. Like, I'm a cloud gamer. I love cloud gaming. That's the number one way that I play my games. But there are certain things about cloud gaming that are polar opposites of AAA genre defining gaming, which has more people within it, which is more of a staple of gaming. That doesn't mean that cloud gaming is not important. It doesn't mean that because cloud gaming is likely going to shape how we game in the future, it doesn't mean that dedicated device gaming is stupid now. That we don't do that in gaming. That's not how we operate. Be more than welcome to look in the other rooms and see what conversations are being had, but do not look down your nose at other gamers. I don't even entertain that here. Hence why I'm not even going to answer those type of questions. Okay, this is what we're talking about here. If you're into those type of discussions, or you find the discussions entertaining, whether they apply to your gaming choice or not, here you are. All right, with that said, let's get into today's show. I over the weekend heard about some snippets from the Last Stand media show called Defining Duke. Okay. And I was enlightened to hear that the host of that show, Matt Plays or something like that, who's someone that I'm not a big fan of their takes. I don't know the person personally. Doesn't seem like a bad guy. But he said some things that were not factually true, that lacked investigation. That was, big cap for Xbox. In regards to GeForce Now, he had made some comparison, and I, in a very sharp reply, because for someone of that ilk, with that type of resources behind them, that push behind them, meaning Last Stand Media, that's ran by Colin Moriarty, is led by Colin Moriarty. They got a lot of hands and and chefs in the kitchen that are helping to continue to make that a staple network within gaming, and kudos to them for that. But with resources like that, and Colin is a very detail oriented person, so I think like a brand has been established, like, no, regardless of what you like, we are going to be we're comprised of a group of people that know their stuff, regardless of the stuff that we know and where it lands us in the gaming landscape. We're a group of gamers that know our stuff, and honestly, Last Stand Media, when I look at some of the things that I want to do with the former PNTS network, or what was formerly known as PNTS network, which will be changing this year, I look at Last Stand Media and say, yeah, that's an example of the direction I want to be headed at. We got different people of different ilks. They stand on their theories and they stand on what they talk about. The leadership, it kind of, I feel very much in the same vein as Colin, where I have an affinity towards PlayStation, but we have people within the network, like at Cloud Dosage and elsewhere, who, don't share my affinity. I still want you to hear their voice. My voice is not going to overshadow theirs. MM2K, the content creator, is on the same level as those guys. So those guys are more than willing to, or more than welcome to challenge me at any given moment on any of the theories that I bring up. We got Cold Blood as part of the content more frequently now because of that dynamic, because he's going to push back and poke back at what I say. I think it makes for engaging entertainment, and it keeps the conversation honest. It's like a constant QC of what's being said. So I can feel for Colin Moriarty that he's going to bring in like-minded people and non-like-minded people, and we can all exist in the same ecosystem, and we can all have our differences and push back. But at the end of the day, we know that we're a network that wants to work together to come to a common goal, right? Not a problem, and I completely understand that. How does that go with Matt Plays? What, I can't remember his name exactly. Sometimes on his own particular content, he doesn't represent that. And I find that problematic, again, not against him personally, but because I'm always thinking about the gamer who goes to these places with the people, and these people with the larger numbers, and listen to what they have to say. And when you speak so definitively on something that is unfactual, it's not factually true, that harms consumers. Now, we all make mistakes. But when you say something like, in a way, like you've clearly researched something, there's a difference between hearing something secondhand and taking that as gospel and running with that. That's bad too. But I think we're all guilty of that at one point in time. But when you say something in a way like you've researched this, when you clearly have it, I think that's damaging to consumers, because they're lost in the sauce, and they're going to be trustworthy. They don't know who to trust. And if you sound like that you have a grasp of the facts, they're going to lean towards you. So yeah, I've had my times responding to him, and don't put too much faith into his content. That being said, I was inspired to hear him say something about fanboys, and he said that like fanboyism is kind of like a disease. And even though I've been guilty of doing some serious fanboying, I've done it to the extent of you could call me a troll more than anything. Yeah, I would give you some heartburn online. I was in those forums picking with people. I like making fun of people, talking shit. That's what I do. You know what I mean? Do it in sports and everything, and talk my smack. But besides that, it didn't go beyond it. I didn't need a brand to stick by no matter what. If I felt like a brand was faltering and they were losing out because of their faltering, then they deserve it. I don't stick with a brand. I go wherever the games go. I'm stuck with a brand no matter what. So I agreed with that sentiment, and I was very interested in that clip. And I'm like, oh, I wonder where that was from. Went into work this weekend, was handling some things, and then I saw on my phone a clip where, he had a show, the Defining Duke, and on Last Stand Media, and it was this clip where they were talking about the rumors and things like that, and I thought the clip was very tantalizing. And so I said, wow, let me watch this. And mistake number one, Last Stand Media. Can I please? As someone, I understand how hard this can be because I don't have a producer. Like I operate off of 4 or 5 different channels, and I do that all on my own. But I understand that you guys have people that rotate and do certain things, so I don't understand why this doesn't happen. But hopefully you guys can do this because you guys do some cool content, right? When you put a clip out there, the source material should always be included. No one should ever have to ask if they've looked. No one should ever have to ask, where did that come from? So I'm looking to see where that came from. I'm looking on YouTube. I can't find it. And here what it is with Last Stand Media. What they do is all of their content starts off, I believe, as Patreon content, or most of it, I believe, starts off as Patreon content. And then a day or two later, it'll come to YouTube. If that is the case, just say so. Just say, this is content that is available in our Patreon wing and such and such, such and such. So I'm not lost in this. You know what? I was because I support other creators. I was on the brink because I didn't understand how all their content works. I don't go looking for it day one, but I was on the brink of saying, you know what? Shit, I'll support Last Stand Media as well. $5 will get me access to the fucking content. Let me support them. I was that close to signing up. Nobody ever responded. So fuck it. I won't. Problem number one. Because when you have people that are assigned to do that, I don't think you can be that flippant for new consumers. It's not just me. I could have very easily went and told 5 other people about this. Man, you should really watch Last Stand Media. When I go and do content live, I always give my sources that I listen to. I listen to, I love Porter Rock's content. I love Reforged Gaming's content, for like the more comedic, in your mouth, like blow right in your face type of content. I listen to Next Gen. I listen to King Thrash. Shout out. We had King Thrash on the show yesterday. It was a hell of a show. Our second biggest podcast on the channel ever. And it might be the biggest by the time it's done. You know what I mean? And then I say, people, I don't even agree with their gaming philosophies, but I love how they talk about gaming because it's all factual. Rebel FM. I could have said, you know what? I joined Last Stand Media and now I support them and I great investment. But the flippancy of that all says something to me like, well, you don't know who we are, or you don't know how to get this. That's you problem. I could be going overboard. That's just how it feels. Perception is 9/10 of the law. I just don't think that if me as someone who struggles to do all this stuff by myself, I don't think when you have a whole group with all hands on deck that you approach your content that way. It just frustrates me, these people that create these clips but don't tell you where the main sourcing is at. I don't like that. So I haven't joined them. Not saying that you shouldn't. Go check out Last Stand Media on Patreon, right? Because there is content there. That's just my decision. Go check them out. I like Colin Moriarty. The overwhelming majority of the time, I agree with what he has to say. But he's one of the big cappers this time. They were doing a reflection podcast of Defining Duke on these rumors where they had Matt and Lord Cognito, who represent Xbox. And then they had the what are those guys called? They're called something. They're the PlayStation guys. They're the guys that agree with Colin Moriarty. And they all came and got together and talked about this. And the cap came from both sides. And I was surprised it wasn't Maddie Plays. You had Lord Cognito, who was trying to stick to the unproven, unsubstantiated Xbox talking points. But more interestingly enough, you had Colin Moriarty capping and going out into the weeds and going overboard based off his righteous indignation. I'm going to address both. I'm going to address Colin first because this is about Xbox. I'll address what Lord Cognito had to say. And again, this is not a personal attack, even though my criticisms may be sharp. It's just it's a critique on conduct and the perceptions being cascaded, where I think we need to start doing better and stop going overboard to make our points. What am I talking about? First, let's start with Colin. And Colin, and this isn't something that me and Cold Blood has discussed, and Cold Blood totally disagrees. And I think that dynamic between me and him makes for great content. But my opinion on this is we have to separate the layman's terms from the actual terms. We can't brush everything together. Everything can't be in a big pot of gumbo when we talk about this, because we gotta understand the different meanings that certain words have when we have these discussions, because then we're going to confuse gamers into not understanding how to convey properly to these businesses what it is that they want. What is that word that I'm saying is has double terminology in the gaming world that is confusing everybody? It's the word competition. You can use the word competition and say Xbox has not been able to compete with PlayStation since the Xbox One era. Since early in the Xbox One era. And the numbers prove that. In the context of saying that Xbox has not been a real threat to PlayStation on a competition level like as they were in the 360 era. They haven't been a threat competitively. When people say Xbox isn't competing with PlayStation, the context that they mean is Xbox hasn't been a competitive threat to PlayStation's bottom line, to PlayStation's place in the gaming community. They haven't really challenged them. They haven't put forth numbers that really compete in a threatening way to PlayStation. That is true. But what also is true when you use the actual technical term of compete, Xbox is a competitor. Xbox definitively is a competitor. Really, in PlayStation's in its entirety in being here, they haven't had a competitive threat outside of the 360. They haven't. Nobody's been a competitive threat to PlayStation, except for the Xbox 360. But they've always had competitors. PlayStation is always, and then the fact that they had competitors, right, is the fact that, look, without there being a competitive threat in the Xbox One era, Sony has changed their strategy towards Western development because of what happened in the 360 era. And they've maintained that even all throughout the Xbox One era, even though Xbox has not been a competitive threat. They've been a competitor. They're a competitor that they take seriously, even though they're not a competitive threat. PlayStation went from being known as just buying second party and third party exclusives primarily and boistering Japanese games to abandoning their Japanese counterparts for a while to double down on their Western development. Sean Layton spoke to this in an interview about how after they secured their dominance in the PlayStation 4 era with Uncharted and Horizon Zero Dawn, they then went back to their Japanese developers and said, look, y'all can stop making mobile games. Y'all, and you know, you can now start developing for us again on the AAA scene. And that's how you got your Neos. That's how you got your Nier Automatas. You got them because they went back to the Japanese developers and said, okay, now we dominate again. And we get where you didn't want to work with the West. We're back on the scene now. Come on. But PlayStation had to do that, making their Western developed games the premiere of the platform. They put them on the front lines to represent the brand. You don't do that without Microsoft's influence. And they maintain that to this day. They've even look, even though Microsoft is not a competitive threat, ABK being purchased meant a lot to them. First, Jim Ryan thought it wasn't about exclusive content. Then Phil Spencer started hinting that it was, getting towards, it might be about exclusivity. That scared the bejeebas out of PlayStation. They've started to realize that, hey, maybe we need to start curating our own games as a service content. What is highlighting PlayStation right now? Helldivers. It isn't the legacy Japanese titles. It's Helldivers 2. They moved their studio headquarters to the West. I repeat, they moved their studio headquarters to the West. This is all, I'm not even talking about stuff done during the 360 era. All this stuff that I am telling you has happened during the Xbox One era, where the Xbox was not a competitive threat. They started aligning their products and services closer to the competitor that is not a competitive threat. What do I mean? Remember after 2018 where they had that phenomenal year, but Xbox was still close to them in revenue made? Guess what? Andrew House is gone. Kazurai comes in. They start changing their structure. That's when 2019, they start talking about we're going to pay attention more to networking and services. That sounds like Xbox. Then again, like I said, the aforementioned focusing on games as a service, that sounds like Xbox. Without Xbox being a competitive threat, they competitively had influence on PlayStation because PlayStation remembers the heartburn that they felt during the 360 era, because Xbox is still in it as a competitor, whether they're a competitive threat as far as running a line with them and taking them out of their spot where they're at in gaming. You never know. Look could change. To make sure that we stay ahead, that there's a wide gap between us and Microsoft in gaming. These are things we have to do based upon what they're doing. You don't do things based off of someone that's competing, somebody that's in your sector is doing, unless they're a competitor in that ilk. At the time that I'm speaking, all the way up to the earlier eras of the Xbox One generation, Xbox has not been a competitive threat. Ever since Phil Spencer took over, they have not been a competitive threat. They have tried, they have failed miserably, but they have not been a competitive threat. But here's why I didn't bring up the 360 era. Because Colin Moriarty said something that was totally outlandish. He said, and this is something that made me happy long term, that I didn't invest in them, and I'm not telling you not to. I don't support zealotry. And I'm starting to believe that Colin, as much as I agree with his takes a lot of times and how, you know, he intelligently breaks things down, I think at the core of Colin is zealotry. Is this fandom wave flagging for PlayStation that is so profound that it creates an ulterior reality. I'm not against those that want to argue, even though I think there's enough evidence to prove that it's not factually true. I'm not against those that want to argue if PlayStation won the PlayStation 3 generation or not. A lot of people attribute to the fact that by the beginning of the Xbox One, PlayStation 4 generation, that in 2013 PlayStation had more consoles sold. That means that PlayStation 3 won. And I don't think that there's any executive that or CFO that looks at the bottom line and feels that way. At the end of the day, it's about content. Who was able to sell the most content? The console is a catalyst for that. Don't get me wrong. PlayStation makes money off the consoles that it sells. You know, made anywhere $50 or less. They made money off the PlayStations that they sold, $50 or less. But that's not where the real money is. The real money is in the game sold, the DLC sold. 360 destroyed them there. Think about it like this. Say in a basketball game, you know, there's 4 quarters in a basketball game. Say if by the time we get to the 3rd quarter, or by the time we get to halftime, the score is 100-50. Right? Score is 100-50. Say if in the 2nd quarter, okay, so again, halftime, the score is 100-50. Say in the 3rd quarter, the team that's down by 50 scores 25, and the team that's up by 50 only scores 5. Let's just say that again. And let's just say if the team that's up by, or now down by 25, again scores 25, and the other team only scores 5. You don't get to walk away and say, oh my God, in the second half, that team outscored them 50-10. It doesn't matter, because by the time the bell buzzes, the buzzer rings, The score is now 110 to 100. You still lost. What happened in the latter years of the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation, Xbox was so ahead in software sold, they said, we've already crippled PlayStation. We've already beat them to the ground. We won this game. We won this game. So they put their subs in and they started focusing on Kinect to get ready for Kinect 2.0. They were no longer competing with them during the rest of that generation as far as bringing out the most stellar AAA games. Now in game 2, if this is a series, that end up hurting Xbox. But they won game 1. They competed. They saw that they blew you away and they didn't put their starters in. But the way Colin describes it is like Xbox wasn't able to compete halfway through. That's not true. Xbox was not competing actively. They were not actively competing with you for the rest of the game because they won the game so early. They started actively competing again during the Xbox One generation. But the way Colin spelled it out, they did not. They weren't competing for a while, or they weren't able to compete. It's not true. The last 2 years of that generation, PlayStation was going all out because they realized they had to build for the next generation. So they were already getting their chops wet with creating better games and getting and establishing better relationships with third-party devs. Xbox felt like that they had their winning formula in Kinect 2.0. Now, if you want to say that for the rest of the series, PlayStation blew them out, that is true. But it is not true that Xbox was not able to compete for the rest of that's baloney. Xbox had won that generation. They could have competed if they wanted to. They sat their players out. Xbox has not been able to compete since Phil Spencer came in. Now let's just say if game 2, they fired a head coach, they changed the starting lineup or the bench, and now even when they put their star players in, they're not playing well. That's essentially what happened with the Xbox One generation. They fired the head coach. They wanted to move in a different direction. They changed their offensive scheme, their defensive scheme, and they could not beat PlayStation to save their lives. That's what happened. Only someone with a zealot mind state would describe it the way that Colin described it. I mean, PlayStation was on the brink of bankruptcy during that era. Even by the end of the score, even though PlayStation had sold more consoles, the software and content was in heavy favor of Xbox. That's what the execs really, and the CFOs and the money people really want. It's not about the console sales. Normally, when you have the console sales, the software sales are aligned with it. That didn't happen. That was a unicorn that generation. It didn't happen that way. Why? Because Xbox already pivoted with 2 years left in the generation and wasn't concerned about it anymore. So they weren't really pushing the 360 all like that. It was just all, you play the multi-plats that are coming, and now what we're focused on is Kinect stuff. And all that was bringing in the Kinect sold well. And for those that were interested in seeing how the Kinect worked, that did numbers for them. But the Kinect really didn't push consoles. It was just an additional peripheral for people that already had the 360 that wanted to try something new. So they cut the generation short in their eyes and already moved on. The last 2 years of the 360 generation was an alpha for the Xbox One generation. And they were doing okay then. They weren't selling consoles, but they were selling the hell out of their peripheral. They had already pivoted. It's just that by the time they came to the Xbox One generation, you know, they got behind early in the quarter, and halfway through the game, they fired the coach. And everything's been downhill since then. If you're decisively chopping this down, that's the only way to look at this. Even if you want to say that, well, we feel like they won the generation because they sold the most consoles, to surmise that they weren't able to compete since halfway, I don't even get where the halfway is from. It's the last 2 years where Xbox pivoted and moved on. That's not halfway through the generation. What are you talking about? If you're saying that because they were picking up momentum and they may have actually, you know, were starting to sell a little bit more software or something, they're still running neck and neck. Colin, what are you talking about? Yeah, I can't go above and beyond and support it personally, but a lot of interesting content still made there. You go do that if you opine. That being said, I want to get to the more unbelievable part. And again, I'm not saying Colin is a bad guy or Colin is doing something nefarious. I just think that something was exposed, a level of zealotry that I'm not comfortable with. Even though, as far as PlayStation content, I have an affinity towards it like Colin does. I don't support, I don't condone zealotry. Now, let's talk about zealotry on the other side, which to me is a little bit more sad. And I'm not saying that this person is a bad person either, but Lord Cognito. In response to Colin's criticism of Xbox and him rightfully saying, hey, look, I got slaughtered for being able to say these things were going to come to fruition, when it was very clear by the writing on the wall that these things were to come to fruition. And I think that's what prompted in Colin kind of exposing himself, but still, that part of his conversation was spot on. And he talked about the parasocial relationship between Xbox, the community and its executives. He talked about how he doesn't understand how Phil Spencer still has a job and Matt Booty still has a job. That if you wanted to be competitive against PlayStation, those were not the right people. And so forth. I think Colin was spot on there. And again, before I pivot to Lord Cognito, who I'm not saying is a bad person, I think Lord Cognito, I mean, the way his personality speaks through the mic, he's a very likable person. How can you not like him? He's a very likable person. He doesn't seem to have a mean-spirited bone in his body. I like him a lot, even though I don't agree with anything that he says. It's not to say that any of these people are bad. Here's my issue with his take, because his take was, look, Phil saved Xbox and nobody else could have saved Xbox but Phil. In that Phil done some things for Xbox that, hold on one second. That Phil did some things for Xbox that just could not be done elsewhere. I mean, by anyone else. Like Phil, done some things for Xbox that were pivotal, and he's not bad at all. He is the savior of Xbox. That the parasocial relationship between Xbox and its community is needed because you're not the king of the hill. And it's not so much that Xbox is overboard in its reaction to its community, But more so, it's just that PlayStation doesn't talk to anybody because they're at the top of the hill. That was what was being implied. Here's the problem with that. Number one, Phil Spencer did not save Xbox. Phil Spencer complied with Satya Nadella, who saved Xbox. That's the God to honest truth. Y'all can believe all you want that Phil walked up to Satya and swiped the shit off his desk and said, "Hey, look, we got to have a serious commitment to gaming." You can believe that all you want. Satya talks about it in his book, about how he's the one that discovered Minecraft. Paul Thurrott said, the illustrious Paul Thurrott, that, you know, the think tank behind all things Microsoft, said Satya went to everybody and said, why should you exist here? One, and how can you integrate services in cloud into what you do? So Game Pass is Satya's baby. All Phil Spencer did was have enough common sense to comply. That's all he did. Minecraft was his baby, Satya's baby. PlayFab was Satya's baby. All that stuff is Satya's baby. Satya's idea to cut Fable Legends and cut Scalebound and all that other stuff, and cut any other future who knows what was cut because of Satya. Who knows what was cut because of Satya? But Satya made Xbox lean and mean. He said, I am not writing any checks until money is made. They cut Xbox. They sold controllers, which made them a decent amount of money. That's why they kept doing it, because the Xbox controller was still considered premier back then. They sold a shit ton of controllers. They were still getting the Xbox paywall. Then something fantastic hits. After they got Minecraft, then Fortnite becomes popular. And Fortnite is heavily played on Xbox. I mean, there's more played on PlayStation, but Fortnite is adding, but it's played well enough on Xbox. That's creating revenue. So Xbox becomes lean and mean, and it's in the black for the first time in a long time. And in a year where Sony made all this money, the most money that it's made in its 24-year history, Xbox, after being clowned for how how they were being outsold by Sony, revenue-wise, they were right there with Sony. It shook up Sony's world. That's why when Colin Moriarty talked about they weren't competitive, even in the Xbox One generation in 2018, when Microsoft's revenue was that close to PlayStation's revenue, even though they sold them out of the wazoo, that shook the foundation of Sony. That was really the closest they've been to a competitive threat in a long time, even though they couldn't sell shit in the traditional sense. They still made a lot of money. That's all Satya. That's Satya. They were lean and mean. Once that happens, and then Satya then realizes in 2019, you got to check my other content where I talk about how Satya went on a rampage in 2019 because of Minecraft and AWS. Because Minecraft was still on AWS, he had a breakout year on the cloud, but it was stymied a little bit because Minecraft had so much activity on AWS. It finally hit him how significant gaming, whether it's on a cloud platform or not, how significant gaming could be to a cloud platform success. he went on a rampage. 2019, he starts sending Phil out to talk about how he can't trust Amazon and Google because they're about to release cloud platforms. They closed Mixer. After paying Ninja and all these other motherfuckers all this money, they closed Mixer. They snatch Minecraft off of AWS. And then lastly, they buy Bethesda, which was the biggest video game purchase at that time at $8 billion. And as we all know, they weren't done. All that shit doesn't happen until 2019 after the whole thing with Minecraft. Satya went on a rampage as far as I'm concerned. That again is all Satya. Now, I'm sure what helps close the deal is the cool relationship that the Bethesda people had with Phil, how comforting him and his team would have been. Yeah, but that relationship was established with Xbox well before then. And if you guys could remember, before the purchase happened, Bethesda was starting to have a more cozier relationship with PlayStation, and they were going to start releasing stuff exclusively there. So during the Phil Spencer era, they were actually pulling back a little bit from the coziness that they had from Xbox. Because if you remember, Bethesda in so many ways always made it known that they weren't the biggest PlayStation fans until recently. And then I got snatched from the jaws of PlayStation after the purchase. That again was Satya, because he's writing that check based off of his experience with Minecraft on AWS. Not only was Bethesda key in their development on the cloud because of Project Orion, but guess what? Project Orion, which was a cloud program that was going to use to improve performance on the cloud, was something critical to the advancement of Google Stadia. So you kill two birds with one stone. You become the proprietary owner of that software, and you snatch it away from one of your main competitors that in the cloud in general. That's why Phil Harrison, at the time of Google Stadia, said, when it was asked by the employees, why are we doing this when they shut down SG&E? And he said, because of Bethesda. He wasn't talking about because they got Bethesda game studios. Bethesda critically wounded Stadia's advancement plans, and they had to go back to the drawing board. And ABK just sealed the fate as far as the psyche of the people at Google and Stadia, because they're like, shit, now we're not going to get Call of Duty either. I mean, they thought irrationally and they thought too preemptively, because look, now all the cloud services are getting it, but that's what they thought. And then then the $1 trillion tech bubble was coming. They decided to bow out. They said this is not going to be worth it in their mind. They were wrong. It's okay, Google. They were wrong. You just need better leadership. And I'm not talking about Jack oh shit, I can't even think of my homie's name. That's originally from PlayStation. That, you know, he was part of the Google Cloud. Not him. I'm talking about the people above him at the ABC board and stuff, and the CEO. They miscalculated. Jack Buser. Not talking about Jack Buser. I'm talking about above Jack Buser's pay grade and above. I think Jack Buser started leaning towards Google Cloud for games because he realized that the Google brass just wasn't serious about gaming. Like, they're not going to do what they need to do to make this a success. They're too antsy. They're not real serious about this. So let's try to make it up somewhere else. And I don't blame Jack for that. He knew what he was smelling, and he said, let's fucking pivot. That being said, that's why Satya did. So Satya is behind that. But secondly, the parasocial relationship between Xbox and its community, talking about, they need this. That's bullshit. I mean, nothing against Lord Cognito. It's bullshit. Why do I say it's bullshit? All we gotta do is look at the 360 era. During the 360 era, I didn't know who any of these motherfuckers were. I didn't know who Aaron Greenberg was. I didn't know who Jay Allen was. I didn't know who Seamus. The only motherfucker I knew was Peter Moore. I was like, Peter Moore's a cool head of Xbox. I didn't know when he left. I just know he's the dude that had the gears and the Halo tattoo. And I said, I like that guy. But all I knew was Major Nelson. All I knew was Peter Moore. That's it. Didn't know anybody else. Didn't need to know anybody else. Why? Because Xbox let the brand do the talking. They had spokespeople, but they fucking let the brand do the talking. How did the brand do the talking? Stellar games, stellar auxiliary functions around the console and the platform. You fast forward to Xbox One, and now you got the CEO, Phil Spencer, in front of the camera. He's doing his Puff Daddy. He's in front of the camera all the time, more so than the games. Excuse me, the conversation becomes more about Phil Spencer than it is the games. What's happening with Xbox? Where's Phil? Back in the 360 days, we didn't need to talk to Peter Moore every day. We liked him when he came on stage, but the games did and the content did the talking. Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Hello? Uh-oh, you can't hear me? All right, let me, can you hear me? What? Okay. I'm just going to mute you for a second until you can hear me. Let me know when you can hear me, Cold Blood. Yeah, but that is the problem with Xbox, is that they don't let the platform do the talking. There's always been this parasocial relationship between the gamers and the Xbox. I used to be one of them. I used to be one of them trolling people in forums and getting kicked out. But it wasn't because of the execs. My relationship was because of the cool shit the box was doing. So we don't need the execs there over the content. That was, because we PlayStation is number one, we got to throw the execs out there. No, you don't. The content will speak for itself. That was already, these people talk like the 360 and the PlayStation 3 isn't part of the more recent stints in gaming. It's part of it. They've already shown you what you need to do with your Xbox. They already showed you what you need to do if you're Xbox. Yes, did PlayStation stumble? Did they stumble in order to give Xbox a try? Yes, but the ball was in Xbox's court. I don't believe this theory that the next generation, if Xbox is firing the way that it did, that it's still going to lose handedly. That's baloney. That is baloney. The PlayStation was starting to catch up and exceed in some cases in numbers because Xbox just walked off the court. They already pivoted to Kinect and turned the Xbox 360 into a beta for Kinect 2.0. We cannot rewrite history here. I know because I was heavily covering this stuff. You got people like Colin trying to rewrite history for the sake of PlayStation over some zealotry. But then you got people like, as much as I like him and Colin, Lord Cognito, still trying to defend Phil like Phil did something great. He was a nice personality that used his likable personality to use doublespeak to keep people engaged and believe that they were still going to they were still at least going to try to compete. That's not true. They were not trying to compete. Not at all. Because they weren't trying to compete. And they were just holding you at bay because too much of the Xbox money-making machine came from you guys that wanted them to compete. They had to keep you at bay in their minds before they pivoted. Now that they got ABK, they don't need to placate to you anymore. They don't need to. They feel that if they sell ABK games everywhere, if they have Game Pass as a service, and they create some type of dongle for the parasocial types, that they can just do what they want without having to placate to a fan base anymore. That's all they did. They placated to a fan base until they didn't have to placate to you anymore. And they don't feel like they got to placate to you anymore. Phil did nothing special. All he did was confuse and trick people. All the stuff that you guys say about Xbox that was done great, that was all Satya. All the notable stuff was Satya. Minecraft, Satya. Playfab, Satya. Lean and Mean, Satya. Game Pass, Satya. Even Bethesda. Even though, Phil had to negotiate the contract, anybody could have negotiated that contract. Satya wrote the check. Satya even only has the gumption to write the check based off of the feedback he was getting because Minecraft was on AWS. And he felt like that he had to squash Amazon and he had to squash Google in the cloud gaming space because he didn't want Amazon's lead in the cloud to get any further. He didn't want their lead over Google to shrink any further. This is all Satya. Anything positive that you say about our Xbox, I don't think there's anything positive about the Xbox brand or service that exists that you can attribute to Phil. There's nothing. He's a nice guy. That's it. You put anybody else in that spot. You put Mike Ybarra in that spot. If he wants Xbox to exist, he knows he got enough common sense to know he has to comply with Satya. What I guarantee you that he does is that he has a keener eye for quality, and then he's able to now go to different entities, and he's now able to get better games for Xbox, way better games, and have way better content that Phil would have had with Satya's permission. So with that said, that is the cap that I heard over the weekend. You don't have to be a competitive threat in order to be a competitive that helps mold the decisions that you're making. Xbox molded a lot of stuff that PlayStation did for being in that being a competitor to them. Now, I don't subscribe to the theory that Xbox has to, that PlayStation needs someone to keep them in check for quality. I don't believe that. Or keeps them in check so they don't charge you $100 per game. That doom and gloom and FUD I don't believe in. But I think there are some things that they have done in the sake of quality that are inspired by them wanting to keep their foot on the neck of Xbox. And if Xbox were to compete in this space and raise that foot off their neck and stand and look PlayStation eye to eye, gaming would be so much better for all of us if they were able to do that. Not being a competitor in that space, whether you're a competitive threat, doesn't give us a better PlayStation. Period. And lastly, I don't know what's going to be said on Thursday, but we got to get over this notion that Phil saved Xbox. Phil did the thing that anybody in that space would have done, which is complied. I still want all my money. I still want to be here. I'm going to comply. This is what Satya wants. I'll comply or leave. That's it. All right. With that said, I am we're done with this content right now. We're going to start doing our stream on Xbox. So join us over there. If you're watching us live, if not, we're going to be talking about Helldivers and some more gaming news. So with that said, I appreciate everybody for coming through. Thank you for checking out the content. Till next time, have a wonderful gaming day. Peace.